Hey everyone, I am your host Tom Nicita, and welcome to episode 13 of the Feb4 Sports Show. We're back outside this week. The rain's held off, so you don't have such a low budget background that we were shooting in last week. Big shout out to North Rock Shopping Centre for allowing us, or not allowing us, but us utilising the shops anyways to film our episode. It's been a relatively big week in sport this week. A few talking points. So let's get straight into it. And before we get into it, I'm just going to apologise on the bets. I don't know what the fuck's going on. We'll get to that later, but onwards and upwards, and we're only 10 weeks away from winning 10K. So this past weekend in sports, without getting into the NRL, because obviously, that's usually our main talking point, there were two big stories for me, or two big occurrences. Number one, we saw Novak Djokovic winning Wimbledon, won his fourth straight Wimbledon and his seventh overall Wimbledon title. He's a freak. I don't like him at all. I'm definitely not one of his biggest fans, but you can't deny that he is a very, very good player. Personally, I don't think he's the GOAT, but I think he's definitely up there now. I still think Rafa Nadal and Roger Federer have a step over him, but, you can't really talk about Djokovic not being in that conversation anymore. He's equal to Rafa on Grand Slam titles, so, it's only so long before he overtakes Rafa. And the other talking point was the NBA Summer League starting. A lot of people don't put much stock into the NBA Summer League, but I really enjoy it. We're seeing a lot of the higher draft picks dominating, which is really good to see. We saw Chet Holmgren, the number 2 pick in the NBA draft. He's been playing really well lately. He's getting a lot of praise. And we also saw Paolo Banchero, the number 1 draft pick. He had a great night yesterday, scoring 23 points in a win. So, it's good to see such young NBA players taking the NBA into new levels, and I think we've got a pretty good future in the NBA. So the biggest news from the NRL, without recapping the individual games, number one for me, again, some poor refereeing over the weekend. In particular, the biggest example of poor refereeing was Tariq Sims being sin bin in the first 2 minutes of the game against the Brisbane Broncos, and we spoke about it last week, and the referees are just having way too much impact on a game, and it's essentially deciding who goes on to win the games. After Tariq Sims was sin bin, we then saw the Brisbane Broncos score, and that pretty much just created the whole roll-on of momentum for them. And, that was really all off a poor call from the referees. So, I think that's another talking point, as it has been for the past few weeks. The second talking point from the NRL over the weekend is the West Tigers and their ongoing coaching debacle. We saw Michael Maguire get sacked earlier on in the season, and they brought in Brett Kimmorley. And yes, Brett Kimmorley was never meant to be the long-term replacement, but there's already talks of him being dropped, which is crazy to think that, they could have just seen the season out with Michael Maguire before they decided to go elsewhere. And now we're hearing that Tim Sheens might come in and replace Brett Kimmorley. Tim Sheens was fired over 10 years ago from the West Tigers, and now he's being brought back in to head coach them without any major improvement to his coaching resume, which to me just makes no sense. I have no idea what they're doing there. The talk is that apparently Tim Sheens will be advising and coaching the younger assistant coaches at the West Tigers, but to me this just sounds like some big facade and big cover-up for the fact that the Tigers didn't get to sign Cameron Serrato. And the third biggest bit of news for me was obviously 2 Queensland players testing positive to COVID. Where does this leave the Queensland Maroons? Where does this leave the Blues? And where does this leave State of Origin game number 3? So this week in the NRL, firstly, we saw the Sharks beating the Storm 28-6. And to be honest, the Storm were only 3 minutes away from being held scoreless against Cronulla. Yes, they do have some injuries. Again, I feel like I say it every week. And, yes, they do have a couple of players out at the moment. But, to be honest, I don't think it is good enough, particularly for a team who has one of the best coaches, if not the best coach in the NRL, in Craig Bellamy, in my opinion. And they also still have their full-strength spine with Harry Grant, Jerome Hughes. Yes, Cameron Munster is out, but Ryan Pappenhausen's also there. I think that they have enough quality to be competing. Yes, even if they're not winning, it's not the biggest deal in the world. But the fact that they've been blown out 2 weeks in a row now, I just don't think it's good enough for Melbourne. The media are starting to report the downward spiral of Melbourne and, talking about their glory days being past them. And I don't think it's that serious yet. However, if this continual roll of poor performances continues to go on, I definitely think that they are in trouble. On to the second game of the week that we need to talk about, the Eels versus the Tigers. Obviously, we saw the Eels pick up a 28-20 win over the West Tigers. And, this game was pretty much, for me, it was just errors and penalties galore. Sometimes I think to myself, how can I bring myself to watch these kinds of games? But I almost find it amusing and fun to watch how bad both of these teams can be. The Eels in particular, they'll go 1 week of playing Penrith and, look like they've been pretty dominant for 75 to 80 minutes of that game, and then they'll go on to play the Tigers, and they'll make half the Tigers squad look like a prime Queensland Maroons team. I just don't get how the Eels can be this poor and this inconsistent, but although it was a terrible game for the Eels, hey, a win's a win. Same story with the Eels as every year. We'll see you in the finals, see what you can do. Hopefully you bring up something, but you'll take what you get at this point in time if you're an Eels fan. On to the Broncos versus Dragons. It was a really big win for the Broncos, actually, and it's a win that's probably going to keep them in the top 8 now for a few more weeks, even despite all the injuries that they've got in their squad. The Dragons were actually on a little bit of a roll, and they were sitting in the top 8 prior to this week, so for the Broncos to pick up a win with all their outs, it was really good to see. There were some absolutely massive performances from forwards who aren't regular first graders, obviously in the absence of Kurt Capewell, Payne Haas and Pat Carrigan. Kobe Hetherington and Zach Hosking were the major reason for me why the Broncos went on to win this game, obviously with the guidance of Adam Reynolds, but two massive performances from boys who aren't getting a lot of first grade minutes this season was really good to see. And I think was the main reason why the Broncos were able to get the win against a informed Dragons team. And although the Dragons have fallen out of the top 8, I don't think it's anything too major yet. Obviously they've got a really good young core still there. And I was really impressed with the performances of Cody Ramsey, Bud Sullivan and Jack Bird in particular, even in a losing effort. And, I think the only obstacle going forward for the Dragons now is just retaining this core, building them up and still, developing that talent and then just building a good NRL team around them. It doesn't have to be any stars in there, but just, building the right pieces with that young core, and we'll only see where they can go from there. Outside of the NRL, onto the Wimbledon. Today was a Monday again, so last night we saw Nick Kyrgios lose to Novak Djokovic 3-1. And, watching it as a Kyrgios fan, sometimes we can get a little bit frustrated and a little bit upset with him, but I just think that that's Nick. You just have to deal with it. Sometimes he goes through the mental battles and sometimes he gets too emotional, but that's what makes him such a great player as well, in my opinion. My only thoughts sometimes with Nick Kyrgios are his opponents beating him, or is he the one that's beating himself? Novak Djokovic said it best yesterday. He pretty much worded it exactly like that. And, you just got to think, if Nick wasn't as emotional and tried to kind of find that fine line between over-emotional and, not caring enough, I think that we could see the best tennis from Nick, and to be honest, I still don't think we've seen the best yet from him. Hopefully he can kind of filter himself, and as he gets older and matures a little bit more, maybe he'll find that line, and let's hope that he can win a Grand Slam or two in the coming years. All right, on to Origin Watch. Obviously we're 2 days away from the biggest game of State of Origin that we've got. It's the decider, Game 3. It's in Suncorp, so that's obviously a massive part to play. For me, this game purely revolves around Cameron Munster, and we might be seeing Billy Slater's first, masterclass or master stroke here as the Queensland Maroons coach. Maybe there's any hope that he might be playing and, they just want to keep their cards close to their chest. And personally, if Cam Munster is out, I'd be bringing in Ben Hunt to the 6 and then bringing Tom Dearden on the bench. I think Dearden can play a few positions, so, I don't think they'd be losing too much there, bringing Dearden on in that Ben Hunt role. But obviously with Munster being out, Queensland's chances are going to get a lot worse. To me, Munster being out significantly weakens the offense of the Queensland Maroons. And obviously we know how their defense has been at the moment. Their right-hand side alone with Selwyn Cobbo, Dane Gagai, Jeremiah Nanai, and of course Daly Cherry Evans. All 4 of those players are in the top 10 missed tacklers in State of Origin so far. We know that DCE can be really sporadic. It likes to charge out of the line, create holes. We obviously know that Selwyn Cobbo and Jeremiah Nanai, they're inexperienced. They're not used to the pace of the game yet. And, 17 missed tackles for Dane Gagai. It speaks for itself. So I think that they're in a lot of trouble, particularly out wide. And, any Blues players that are going to target that side, I think they could be scoring some early points. I hate to keep harping on with a point, but again, if Cameron Munster is out, which we expect, I think that the only way Queensland win this game is through big performances from Harry Grant, Kalen Ponga and Pat Carrigan. Cameron Munster being one X factor that's going to be out. They've got 3 young X factors there who can stand up and take this game over. And I think that in particular, my personal preference, Harry Grant's got to stand up. He's got to dictate the flow of the game, the pace of the game. And, if he and Ponga and Carrigan get as involved as possible, I think that Queensland really do stand a chance in this game still. For the Blues, Matt Burton's kicking game may be a little bit less effective now that the fact that Corey Oates has come in from Murray Tuolungi, who also tested positive for COVID. I still think that if Burton gets any significant time to be able to kick, then that's obviously also going to free up Nathan Cleary to kick. And, I think they could put Queensland under a lot of pressure. As well for the Blues, I think that the absence of Payne Haas is being really overlooked right now, not just by the media, but also by, the New South Wales fans. We've obviously seen Daniel Saifiti get given a chance in the State of Origin arena, and it's now time for Jacob Saifiti to get that chance. And to be honest, he's got massive shoes to fill. I think that Payne Haas is our best forward consistently for us. He's the biggest workhorse, and the fact that an inexperienced Saifiti coming in is going to have to fill those shoes is a big role, but let's just hope that he can fill these shoes for the Blues' best chance to go on and win Game 3 of the State of Origin. And finally, my final point for the Blues, it's the exact same story as Game 2. We need to see Nathan Cleary getting as involved as possible, running the ball. Obviously, his kicking game's really, really important as well, pinning the Queenslanders down and putting pressure on them. I think if he plays a great game again, I don't see there's any real way in the Blues losing this. this game. So on to one of our favourite segments. We've got 3 burning questions, and basically our 3 questions have all come from TikTok this week. Our first one is, who is our Rookie of the Year? So firstly, to win Rookie of the Year, you have had to have played less than 5 games going into the current NRL season, or obviously made your debut in that NRL season. So there are a few players that can kind of fill that gap. Unfortunately, Joseph Suwali played 5 games last year, so we can't include him. For me, there are only real 2 front runners right now, and that's Taylor May and Jeremiah Nanai. Taylor May, look, we've obviously seen him score 14 tries in 14 games, and they're not just basic wingers tries. You know, he's actually doing some really good work there. Yes, he's in a really good system at the moment, but I still think he's been a standout for me. And Jeremiah Nanai, well, playing for the Queensland Maroons in your first year of NRL footy, pretty impressive. For me, they're the only really 2 standouts right now. However, honourable mentions go to Xavier Savage and Ezra Mam. And, you know, if the Cowboys and Broncos, respectively, both have really good finishes to the season, we could possibly see those guys come into the conversation. But for now, for me, personally, Taylor May is the front runner, Jeremiah Nanai in a close second. Our second question for 3 burning questions comes from TikTok again. And our viewer asked, who should the Dolphins go for now that Reece Walsh has signed to Brisbane? Outside of Cam Munster, we've obviously heard Luke Brooks' name being thrown about, and I don't think he's a long-term answer, but at the moment, it doesn't really look like they've got anyone else to go to. We're also hearing Tessie New and Tyrell Sloan, obviously both being told that they're not in their club's predicted futures. You know, their options right now. To be honest, for the Dolphins, I don't really see any big-name signings being made anytime soon. If I were them, I'd be going for the 3 players I just spoke about, just to at least kind of have some direction going forward. The only other big-name player who is off contract is Angus Crichton, and I know that they've already got a lot of their forward pack set up and ready to go for next year, but I'd be trying to attract Angus Crichton just to also then try to attract some more talent to the club. But for the Dolphins, I really don't see anything big coming for them soon. My thought process for the Dolphins is Tyson Gamble is off contract in 2023, and he's who I'd be throwing my money at, but I really don't see any other answers going forward, to be honest. And our final question for 3 burning questions, this came from cameraman Rudy on TikTok, and he asked, who is set up better for the next 5 years, the Queensland Maroons or the New South Wales Blues? Now, I think that this is easily the closest that these both teams have been, you know, for the last 15 years, you know, probably dating back to as far as 2005, 2006 before we could have started having these conversations. It depends how you look at it, though. I think the Queensland forward pack is going to be a lot stronger over the next few years. Obviously, you know, their young core of forwards is all under the age of 25, 26, and Harry Grant will be there in the hooker to steer the forwards around. However, the New South Wales Blues, their backline is entirely young players except for James Tedesco. However, we could see predominant amount of the New South Wales Blues backline being there for not only the next 5 years, but maybe even the next 10 years. So I think that the Blues just get the edge of the Maroons in terms of who's going to be better over the next 5 to 10 years. However, you know, it's really good signs that it's so close, because I don't really think that there's any clear Origin winner for the next, 5 to 10 years coming. So, you know, good signs for footy, good signs for State of Origin, and good signs for us fans. Finally, the road to 10K multi. I don't even know what to say to you guys. It's not like we're picking fucking stupid legs. We're picking legs that should come in, but it's just one of those things, you know, when it rains, it pours, and when it's dry, it's fucking dry as the Sahara. So, look, I'm not going to put a multi together. I'm just going to give you my value pick. It comes in at $2. So if we put $10 on it, we're going to get $20 straight out. And that's Brian To'o, anytime try scorer in the State of Origin on Wednesday night. For me, I might chuck 20 or 30 on it, you know, just to try to fix all my losses over the past few weeks. That's my pick for this week. It comes in at $2. Put $10 on it, and in 10 weeks' time from now, we'll have 10K. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Tom Nicita, and that is episode 13 of the Feb4 Sports Show. We appreciate you guys, as always, tuning in, and keep the questions coming. I will see you soon.